Check 1, 2. That's the plan.
Check. There we go. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, we got a response. All right, well, if you go ahead and stand with us this morning, we're going to try to wake up a little bit so that we're ready to engage and participate. Sing Graves in the Gardens. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, treasures of faith, are never enough. Then you came along, put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your arms. Sing, there's nothing, oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. Let's sing that again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. God, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. Sing that one more time. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. Amen. You can have a seat.
Well, welcome this morning, and thanks again. I'm not a big one for applause, but I do want to express appreciation, so let's, yeah. Hillary did that because she knows I'm not a big one for applause, so that's why she gave me the thumbs up, but it was okay this time. So again, these three have given up their time, and I'll just call out that my daughter is not a pastor, so she didn't even have to be here. So, but really, I appreciate Ben and Joel and Hillary coming from different churches, leading us in worship, and they'll be back for communion, and really appreciate, as we all know in ministry, that's one of the biggest sacrifices and gifts is time. So thank you for doing that, you guys. And looking forward to what today brings. With Tim. And we do have some people here today. We have a group from Albert Lee and a few others that have come in from CPC and Hope. And maybe I hope I didn't miss anybody else. And anyway, that weren't here last night, so you have a treat in store. And without further ado, I'll just invite Tim to to get started. We're going to have a lot of interactions, so I appreciate the way everyone's been connecting. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. Okay. Morning, friends. Let's jump in. So, quick show of hands while I'm getting my notes ready so that we all stay on task. Okay. Yes, I love it. Thank you for already showing your hands. Well done. Y'all are gold star. I appreciate it. Who was here last night? Okay, anybody that we have some new? Okay, I just want to get a feel. So last night we introduced this metaphor of a tree behind us, you see on the screen. And what we talked about was in Psalm 1, God describes the life of flourishing as the life of a tree planted by streams of water, which sinks deep roots and its branches are strong. They don't wither. Everything they do prospers. It produces fruit in season. That's the life of a flourishing disciple. And if that's the life of a flourishing disciple, if blessed is the one who is like a tree, then as church leaders, we cultivate trees. We don't fix cars. And so we're going to look at this metaphor of what does it look like to be a gardener and not a mechanic. We're going to unpack this framework over the course of the next 2 hours. We'll have some time to first absorb what these different symbols mean. So the first part of this is going to be a little bit of content transfer, make sure we all understand what the framework is trying to accomplish, and then we'll have some time to interact and pray and discern, both as a presbytery, as churches, and as individuals before we finish. That's the goal. So Lord willing, by the time we all go to lunch, everybody will have had time to at least begin the discernment process of a flourishing next step of cultivation, not of mechanic work. Does that make sense? Great. So let me pray, and then we're going to jump in. Lord, we are grateful that where 2 or 3 are gathered, you also are in their midst. And there's more than 2 here. And so, God, we believe that you came long before we showed up, that you are here as we sit, that you will stay long after we all leave and go to our different churches. But I am mindful, Lord, that as I pray over this meeting, each person sitting in these chairs represents innumerable lives that they influence, lead, love, and are connected to. And so, God, as we gather together, being simultaneously sheep and shepherds, I pray that you would be at work in our midst. Give us eyes to see it, hearts to trust it. Where we need to be encouraged, Lord, let us take a breath and enjoy who you are. And where we need to be challenged, Lord, let us be galvanized out of grace rather than shame, so that we can all leave refreshed and strengthened for the road ahead. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. So for those that were here, we had a loving challenge where we sat in groups, and we're not going to do a full debrief, but I just want to hear from some of you. We talked about stories that perhaps were a bit more mechanical than gardening-like. We talked about breakthroughs that might have happened in your church, and we talked about questions that your church might be asking. What did y'all hear? What jumped out? Yeah. Welcome to the team. Yeah. It's easy to do. Easy to do. Okay. What else did we hear?
Can't fix people.
Can't fix people. Man, as much as I have tried, people just are not cars that are easily fixed. That is true. Yeah. You want growth? Yeah, so there's also a holy discontent and a desire. That's great. We want growth. What else? What about some breakthroughs? How has God already shown up in your churches? We're going to learn that Tim is somebody who likes to tell people what to do. So Maddie's going to tell us some breakthroughs that have happened, and she didn't even know that was going to happen. So talk to our group. What's up? If y'all don't know Maddie, by the way, she is going to be one of the next eco pastors. She doesn't even know that yet, but it's going to be a thing. So talk to us about what's going on in Knox. What are some breakthroughs that you've experienced? Praise the Lord. Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Okay. What else is going on in our presbytery that we can be grateful for? Xander, what do you think?
Yeah, I knew you were going to. Okay.
Just made eye contact, man. That's the rule. Everybody's like, I regret putting my name boldly on my, yeah.
I noticed as breakthrough, not only for our church, but like the need for discipling our younger generations. And then the breakthroughs we had were like the different churches, their plans to go out and intentionally disciple our younger disciples and bring them up. And then we talked about this breakthrough of a change in the culture to give them, and not just keeping, like, giving them a gold coin, but instead teaching them where the gold coin comes from, how to keep growing, can't grow gold, but how to keep growing the gold coin and to care for it in a more intimate and intentional way. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Love it. See, now the name tag's off, but I know now, so we're good. Yeah. Dina, can I pick on you? What questions did you hear in your group?
About how to get hope
Hmm.
from leaders. They're hungry for how to get hope.
Yeah. Yeah, we're incurably hope-based creatures. We need something to look forward to. Yeah, that's great. What other questions?
Also some from, especially some smaller churches where I'm doing supply preaching, is, are we going to make it? Are we going to survive?
Yeah. Those are heavy questions, and they go together. Yeah. That's important, guys. So let's stay connected, because I think sometimes it's more important to share the questions than it is to provide the answers. Just to have people listening and journeying together. That's what we get to do in Presbytery world. And I know that y'all range from like Nebraska all the way over to Dakotas. I mean, that's a wide geographic footprint. So bless you for all gathering together. But I trust and hope that today's discussion will touch on some of the themes that were even brought up today. Give us some framework for how we can approach leadership going forward. So let's ground ourselves in Scripture. Want to keep reiterating that this metaphor is not something that we're just making up out of thin air, that it is a biblical metaphor. You guys know these passages, but Jesus had a couple of things to say where he said, watch out for the false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. Essentially, not everybody that looks like a religious leader is actually somebody that you want to follow. Not everybody that looks put together is somebody that's actually worth following. And so he said, by their fruit, you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit. A bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree can't bear bad fruit. And a bad tree can't bear good fruit. Is he just repeating himself? Or is he saying, look at their fruit and you'll see what their heart is like? And then, if your heart is in the right place, you don't have to stress about what the fruit will be. It will come. Those are two different statements, depending on how you read the passage. Then it says, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. And so we all take a breath, and we remember that fruit here is not attendance. Fruit here is not buildings and cash. Fruit in the Sermon on the Mount was to a whole bunch of people that were in an economy that looks nothing like our world. So he's not talking about the institutional church. He's talking about lives transformed, fruit of the Spirit, the way we interact with each other, our willingness to forgive and have hard conversations. Those are the types of things that Jesus is pointing to. And so we look at this metaphor to say, all right, well, if we are going to recognize people by their fruit, then that means fruit is way over here on the right, and then everything else that Jesus was assuming is over here left to right. This is our metaphor. Over the course of the day, we're going to walk through each of these 7 components. You guys are going to be like arborist masters. I did hear that somebody is an ag. We got some agriculturally engaged folks in the room. Is that true?
They're all farmers.
They're all farmers? Amazing. So I'm just going to pre-apologize for anything that I get wrong, because as y'all know from last night, that I am not a farmer. I appreciate the work of farmers, but that is not my skill set. So what often happens, and you guys know this, the fruit is the thing that you see. right? We can immediately see the fruit of a church. We can see the fruit of people. And the way that ECO is trying to get us to describe this broadly, we're going to define it more specifically by the time we're done, is that a healthy church produces mature disciples that impact their environment. In other words, Jesus said in Matthew 28, go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them, teaching them to do everything I've commanded. Right? So there's a sense of we've got to be discipled and then make disciples. We've got to worship and we've got to be on mission. We've got to glorify God and we've got to share that with others. I'll say it as many times as I can. So that's what healthy fruit is in its broadest term. And what often happens when we're in church world is we know the type of fruit we want to see. I just want more youth kids in my ministry. I just want my circles to be nice to each other rather than to compete with each other. I just want, maybe that's just my church and not yours. I just want, right, we know the type of fruit that we want to see. And so then we try to fix the fruit. You ever try to do that on a fruit tree? That orange tree is looking a little shabby. What I need to do is go to whatever the local grocery store is. Ours is Publix, right? But I'll staple it to the tree. It'll look great for a little bit. Go get some fake oranges. Those will last a long time. They don't even talk back. They don't send any emails. They do not. They just sit there and look good, right? That's the ideal, but that's not reality. And so the danger of knowing that fruit is something that we see is that we often want to start and try and immediately tinker with the fruit. And that is the definition of what we talked about last night. It's mechanic work rather than gardening. Now, but the passage from Matthew 7 doesn't say stop noticing the fruit. It actually says pay attention to it. But don't pay attention in the sense of tinkering in that world. You've got to pay attention to what it reveals. Now, let me tell you a story. I again, moved to this wonderful, quirky little town called Fort Pierce 6 years ago, and they've got a rich history of agriculture, grapefruits, and oranges and whatnot. And so I went to a congregate's home, and it was Suzanne's home. I don't know what your church member's name is, but every church has a Suzanne. We're like, I don't know how you make food taste as good as it does, but it is incredible. Like everything she touches is manna. I'm sure it's butter and salt and all the things you're not supposed to have, but goodness gracious, right? Everybody knows their person. So I was at Suzanne's house and we had sliced roast beef sandwiches that fell from the Lord. Like it was amazing. And on the plate was this beautiful, a little bit opulent for an afternoon lunch, like starred garnish. I mean, it had like texture and ridges to it. And I thought, Lord, Suzanne, I'm not that fancy. That's just not, like, you don't need to put the garnish on the sandwich plate. And so I go through, I eat my sandwich, and I'm sitting there talking with Suzanne, and she looks me dead in the eyes and says, are you not going to eat your starfruit? Thank you. For those of you that are unfamiliar, starfruit is edible, and it is an actual plant that's like it's like a grape and a banana had a love child, and it's in the shape of a star. I mean, like, it's a weird fruit. And I did not know that it existed, and I looked at this and thought, okay. And so I tried starfruit for the first time, and I told that story in a sermon because I wanted to try and endear myself to the congregation with how ignorant I am, and they all laughed because this is a very common plant in their neighborhood. And then I was gifted a starfruit tree to put in my backyard. Now, how do you think that went? Everybody's like, oh, what a nice gift. No, like, think about the stories I told last night. Did that last? Absolutely not. So it produced fruit the first 3 months. And then what has happened in the last 5.5 years is it's still alive, but it has not produced a single starfruit in 5.5 years. Now, some of it I blame my cute kids, but the reality is I don't actually know, I still don't fully know what a starfruit is, let alone how to cultivate it. Now, think about that for a minute. What if you and I are so intuitive and instinctual about what a disciple is? Well, we know we're supposed to be making disciples. We know people are supposed to be growing in the Lord. Well, of course our programs are going to do it. Of course our systems are going to do it. Our people know what that looks like. But maybe, just maybe, we haven't been thoughtful enough to engage and equip and bring people along who are new to Jesus or who are so seasoned but are unfamiliar with all the cultural changes around. The conversation here is important. But we can't assume that people know what the fruit of discipleship actually is. So this slide is saying the fruit of a person, Matthew 7 tells us, is the culmination of everything from seed to roots all the way out. Those systems work together, and if they work together, they produce star fruit. They produce oranges. They produce whatever. And if there is no fruit on the branches, then something is wrong in an earlier part of the tree. Good, healthy trees produce fruit naturally. Might be different types, there might be different amounts each year, but healthy trees produce fruit. And so what we need to do is let the fruit instruct us to look deeper. Okay? So if we don't have fruit, or if the fruit is diseased, then we dig in and figure out what's going on. The last line is going to sound strange, but just to say, this passage said you don't get figs from thorn bushes, you don't get oranges from star fruits. The root system needs to connect to the fruit that we're talking about. That's going to be really important by the time we're done. But for right now, and what you'll see over the course is really, really small font. And so I'm going to give this to you in slide deck form later, so don't feel the need to really dig in deep. But these questions will be helpful to just process briefly. When we talk about a healthy church, what does it visibly look like in your mind's eye? What do you instinctually define as fruit? If Knox were thriving 5 years from now, what would it look like? How would it feel different in our congregation and in our community? At CPC, what outcomes do we tend to measure, and what do those measures actually tell us? How do we know someone's growing as a disciple through our ministry? What a great question. How do we know? And how well do we inspect our fruit? Now, all of those things are important, and I hope what we're showing is that this is why we need to have the first 6 components of the process. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do now is say, great, put a pin in that, because I know that's what the urgency is. Now let's go and start at the beginning. Yes, ma'am?
Can you tell them they'll get a booklet with all of this on it?
All of it. You guys are going to get a booklet. You're going to get the digital slides. You're going to get oversized pieces of paper for discernment on which components you are thriving with and not thriving with. We're going to give you so many resources, so you can just, unfortunately, stare at the bald-headed man with a clicker. I mean, that's just whatever you need. So just take a breath. We're going to get you everything, so you don't have to furiously take notes. Unless the Spirit is speaking to you, then write that down. I'm not going to give that to you. Okay? Great. Let's talk about what Jesus said. Right? We said Matthew 28. Who's got a Bible or a phone handy and a good radio voice? I want somebody to read Matthew 28, 16 to 20.
The 11 disciples traveled to Galilee to the mountain where Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped, but some doubted. Jesus came near and said to them, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you, and remember, I am with you always to the end of the age."
So what's the core identity of a Christian? What's their invitation and calling?
Be sent.
To be sent. Yeah, that first word is go away. As you go through life, as you leave here, it's not even like a primary emphasis. Jesus is like, look, I'm going to assume this in the Greek. Like, as you go and make disciples. Now, which people are called to go? Just the SWAT team, right? Just the super Christians, just the paid pastors. Which ones are called? Everybody. And how many were called in this passage? That's awkward. I thought there were 12 disciples. Where's the 12th one? Yes, hanging from a tree. That's right. We're going to talk awkwardly about Judas now. Judas isn't there. Do you think that group of 11 disciples felt like they were thriving and ready to steward the mission of Jesus going forward? Not a chance. Of course they worshiped him and doubted at the same time. So at some point over the course of the day, when you feel overwhelmed, like we're not going to possibly integrate this metaphor and do all these things in our church, the limping 11, as Dale Bruner describes them, are the people that Jesus trusts with his mission. The imperfect people with a perfect word. Yeah. Now, how are they sent? They're sent in the context of worship. So it's not just a missional church. It is mission driven from an overflow of worship and delight and gratitude. And so Jesus buttons it with, I am with you always. You're not going by yourself. Yeah. So the DNA of a church is to be a worshiping community sent on mission. The DNA of a Christian is to be a worshiper of Jesus sent on mission. If we don't believe it, there's no chance anybody else in our churches is going to. Now, Ephesians 2. Okay, radio voice, we're going to start at verse 8. Yes, ma'am, Heidi. Let's go loud and proud.
Verse 8.
Yeah.
For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourself. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do.
Just in case we feel like it's our job to save people, just in case it's our job to sell Jesus to people, Paul shows us, hey, whoa. This is a gift. It's a gift given. It's a gift that Jesus pursues, and we follow along and figure out where he's at work. It's by grace you've been saved through faith. It's not by works that you received this gift. And then he says, but by the way, once you've received it, once you realized that you've got this invitation, you realize there is a specific, unique calling on your life. The Greek word for we are God's handiwork or masterpiece, depending on how your translation reads, is the Greek word poema. It means poem. You are God's work of art. You're his unique craftsmanship. You were uniquely formed with a particular set of things, of good works that only you are called and equipped to do. And that means that only your church is called and equipped to do. No one in this room is called to be anyone else. We believe in that? Good. We're going to talk about it more. Okay? So, when we look at a seed, we want to think about these two verses. There is a general identity to all healthy churches, and there is a specific identity to each church. There is a universal calling on all Christians, and there is a specific set of works that each Christian is uniquely invited to explore and to live into. Both things need to be true if we're going to have awareness of our seed. Does that make sense? So when we look at this passage, we look at this slide, we're thinking about a core identity of a church. It's shaped over time in a particular place to produce a particular fruit that God has prepared. Right? We're cultivating life that God has already placed in the ground. So now, let's talk about it. The seed has the core DNA, both the specific and the general calling. This DNA doesn't change much. Depending on how old your church is, it still doesn't change much. It might change how it expresses itself over time, but DNA is something that is deep. Right? And so there's different ways that we can uncover this, but I want to make sure that we're separating programs, we're separating leadership, we're separating all things away. This is about a core identity that God put in the dirt to uncover when the time was right. I'll tell you a quick story. The church that we were at, obviously I've shared that it has steep decline. I'm going to tell stories about more than just my church as we go, but some of them just feel like they're helpful. And when we were going through our visioning process, trying to discover our DNA, our seed, one of the questions was, hey, people who've been here for 30, 40 years, why did you come back the second time? And they kept telling stories about this one elder who did the world's greatest Donald Duck impersonation. That was very random. Now, if you had looked on a Sunday at that point in time in our church, it was a sea of tired and discouraged. Everybody was very stoic. Everybody was very quiet. Everybody was very polite. And then as soon as we started talking about Donald Duck impressions, then we started hearing stories of doing a living nativity and one of the pastors having to chase a sheep down the main thoroughfare of our city. Like we were starting to tell all of these wacky, silly stories. And then somebody who was new to the church raised their hand and said, "What happened? I don't see that silliness anymore." And then everybody took a breath. And somebody else said, maybe one of the reasons why we're so discouraged is we've lost that part of ourselves. But man, now we have a tagline in our church that says we take Jesus seriously without taking ourselves seriously. And whether you're 85 or 8 minutes old, we take that as part of the core personality and DNA of who we are. Right? And so when we look at this, that's the type of stuff we want to discover. Look at your congregational history. Look at the strengths of the people in your church. Look at the surrounding community. And that Venn diagram, that sweet spot in the middle, is what makes your church have a unique calling. There is no other church that has the same center spot. None. Not one. Now, you saw on the slide that the DNA can change slightly over time. I want to make sure that we unpack what that means. When our church was founded, it was on the edge of town in an agricultural community in the middle of the 1960s when denominational loyalty was thriving. Now, if you throw a rock 1 mile in any direction around our church, it'll be 1/3 white, 1/3 black, 1/3 Hispanic. The Hispanic community is a 50-50 split on whether they speak English or not. And none of that existed when the church was formed. But our location hasn't changed. So what we're wrestling with as a church is to say, okay, it took 65 years to get there, but the community that we are immersed in changed without our permission and without us realizing it, but we steward where God has placed us. So our seed has slowly shifted. Same personality, same congregational strengths, different context. Some of you feel that with the way that your towns maybe lost a particular thriving business. If it was a company town, we did some coaching with the headquarters of Caterpillar in the middle of Illinois. And that community was filled with engineers who were smarter than any of us that were coming in to coach them. And they had wild strengths, but the town was reeling because the headquarters of the company, it was a company town, it had relocated. And so now they were all of a sudden in the poverty and assistance business rather than in the how do we resource people who are thriving financially business. Have we done that work? Church leaders, could you name what's the intersection of the community, the strengths, the congregational history? We need to know our seed. Now, how many of you in the room are founding pastors? No one else? Okay. How many of you are charter members of your church? Nice. Okay, so then here's my question. How do we uncover this? And that's not a rhetorical question. What would it look like to uncover the history and the personality of your churches if you had to go back and discover it right now? What would you do? Say what now? Find somebody who knows where the bodies are buried and ask them about it. Yeah, like 100%. Yeah, what else? Yeah. Uh-huh. So any other, do y'all have like the list of the people who have been at the church the longest or the people that you celebrate that are having their 90th birthday at the church? You know, those sorts of things that you do. Take them to lunch beforehand. Ask them questions. They love to brag on the church. Don't ask them for like all the negative stuff. Like, when were you the most proud of your church in your history, right? Imagine what it would be like to tell that kind of story. If you decide at the end of this to go through the full Cultivating Flourishing Church process, they'll guide you through creating a congregational timeline where you chart the top proud, top painful moments and what values and personality traits you discover. It's really, really wonderful to see a church celebrate their uniqueness. When we found out that we were a silly church, there was a sense of like, yeah, we are. Right? Because, you know, Presbyterians, we have a reputation in communities, right? We have the frozen chosen vibe about us. And so this church was like, yeah, we're not very good Presbyterians. We like the theology stuff, but none of that. And all of a sudden it became a point of pride because they connected it to their DNA. And then we started to dig and we found stories that the church was planted in a bar downtown and they had to clean up empties on Saturday to worship on Sunday. Oh, you better believe we had a field day with the implications of what that meant for our risk-taking, for how we handle people who might be a little more rough and tumble that visit. This is powerful stuff. Do we know our seeds? Okay? Questions on seeds. What feels muddy at this point? Take a minute and look at these questions. What strikes?
When you look at your seeds, are you looking too much at the history, not the what we show?
It's a great question, and it can happen that we look too much in the past without looking forward. And that's part of why we have this. Sorry, I can't go back with this thing. I'm so sorry. Back, 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 back. That's just why history is 1 out of 3. Right? So present congregational strengths. Surrounding community might even be looking forward to some of the trends that you see. So we got to do both. Bifocal lenses. Absolutely.
Do congregational strengths change as your congregation changes?
Mm-hmm. I can.
So you just keep revisiting that.
Indeed you do. Yeah. The work of a gardener is to really understand the seeds you're planting. That's important. Okay? So, it's probably not something you want to revisit every 6 months, but probably something you want to look at every couple years. Anything changed? So we get into a rhythm of updating our vision frame, which I'm about to tell you about. It naturally points us in that direction.
Tim, what are the implications when you have change in leadership every 5 to 10 years?
The ideal implications are that you've done this work so that when you're bringing in a new leader, you're clear. This is who we are that's not up for change. And if the leader's worth their salt, they're going to connect any changes in the future to staying true to your identity rather than altering it. Hey guys, we are a church that does hard things, and I know we have always had 2 worship services, but the elders have prayed and wrestled, and it's really hard. We're going to merge to 1 worship service, and that's different than it's ever been, but we're doing it because we've always been together as a community. We have always valued authentic connections, and we're seeing how this is fraying us as a community. Did that go over well in my church? No. But it's a massive change that we connected to our history. So that's the implication. We got to know the story and to know where we're deviating and to make sure that we separate expression of DNA from DNA. Yeah, great questions, guys. Now, let's keep moving because there's many stories to tell and we're not done yet. So soil, we got it. Roots, we got it. Let's jump into this. Roots are not history. So often when we have people use this metaphor, we think, we're going to get back to our roots and we're going to tap into our stories and all of the ways that we have been rooted in our community. Do not think that. Roots in this metaphor are vision. This is forward thinking. This is looking ahead, especially. Okay, so the seed tells you your DNA. The root system is what comes from the seed when the seed breaks apart and starts to drill into local soil. And we want you to be thinking about a vision in 2 ways. Most churches have vision statements to the degree that they are used or not. I don't know. But we want you to have 2 different types of vision. I want you to have a corporate vision and a discipleship vision. Now, I'm biased. I love to coach people through a vision frame, which is a particular way of tackling those 2. And so if that's something you're interested in, we can talk. I love doing it. But you need to have, as a church, a sense of where God is calling you in the next 5 to 10 years. Where's the land of milk and honey? What's the next mountain that God is inviting you to cross? If we're not unified on a sense of direction, then all of your programs and ministries will scatter into different directions. And so we have what is the unique mission, the unique calling, the Ephesians 2:10 that we're tackling in the next 5 to 10 years, and what would it look like to tackle it? The way we do it in Vision Frame is we answer 5 questions. What are we doing? The mission. Why are we doing it? What motivates us? Our values, our personalities. How do we do it? Our discipleship strategy. When do we know we've done it? We've got clear measures of discipleship. And where would God take us if we went there? And we have a vision that breaks into 5 to 10 years, 3 years, 1 year, and 90 days. And if that sounds corporate, that's not the idea. What we try to say is it sounds like driving a vehicle. It sounds like steering. You have to have clarity of long and short-term direction in order to stay unified. Sounds like guiding a flock. You got to take them to the next green pasture and know that you're trying to cross through this valley. Does that make sense? Okay, so corporate vision, this is really important. I know we spend a lot of time on this in Ecoland, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it right now, but that is critical. One thing that I do want to make sure that we understand, just to pick on pastors, because I need to be picked on every now and again. We know this, but let me say it again. Vision passes through people, not paper. Presbyterians love white papers. I love white papers. They just make me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Vision passes through people, not paper. So the vision has not leaked until the church starts to say it back to you without being asked. Which means that, as Pat Lencioni would say, our job as pastors is chief reminding officers. This is where we're going. Isn't it great? This is where we're going. Isn't it great? And then by the 7th time, we know, right? You can think of it, but that's our job. Now, here's the harder one. The discipleship vision is not where the church, capital C, or your little c church is going, but where do you want to see the individual disciples change and transform and flourish? Given your place and your people and the passions of your leadership, what are the unique markers of discipleship growth that look like your Ephesians 2:10 for your church? This one, ECO is actively working on developing some resources for. The vision framing process is influencing that. They call it the dream disciple, where you name 4 traits that unlock the rest of them. So if you go over to Menlo, that's right across the street from Apple headquarters, or Meta headquarters, one of those tech firms, and there's a unique, wildly diverse congregation with high expectations, high busyness, high productivity. They use the words like savvy influencer, embedded storyteller to describe the traits of discipleship. Are those words in the Bible? But a savvy influencer is a way of saying biblical worldview that understands how to make missionary connections with their peers. Embedded influencer is a way of saying we want you to live life amongst people who don't know Jesus and slowly show them, not just beat it into them, but show them with words and actions what the life of following Jesus is like. And so then they create environments that train people in each of their 4 traits. And then they create systems that follow up to celebrate when people grow in those areas, and they organize their discipleship around it. Now, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but they've defined these are the 4 traits. This is our corporate vision and our discipleship vision. If we don't have these things, we're a tree without roots. What do trees without roots do? Fall down. I know that one. They fall. They don't necessarily die. Have you ever seen one of those trees laying down, kind of like roots all gangly? But the roots stabilize. The roots give support and structure. The roots guide the tree so that it can grow tall and reach out and provide shade and fruit. So let's look at our root system. As you look at these questions, what are your questions? I love the way that Caitlin framed the first question. Very clear, we got an idea, kind of. And identity turf wars. I know that none of your churches have ever fought for the direction of the church amongst yourselves. But just imagine hypothetically what that would be like. And what would it look like to just have clarity to say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but that's not us. There was a church where a congregant came up to the pastor and said, we have an idea. We want to introduce chair yoga in the sanctuary. Now, depending on one's perspective, that sounds like a weird idea, a bad idea, or like, oh, what a creative idea. So this particular pastor had no idea what chair yoga was and said, like, what are you talking about? That is a very strange request, and immediately thought, like, I'm just going to say no because that's dumb and I don't have time. That was his response. But he had just gone through this visioning process and was trying to train his leaders to use their vision as a tool. And so he said to this person, our vision as a church is to make these disciples. And that means that the components of discipleship that we've unpacked are these 3 things. Tell me, which one of those do you think chair yoga would impact Now, if you say it with snark, it sounds like you're just rejecting them with theological uppityness. But if you say it with pastoral compassion, the person actually felt invited to discern. So they left for a week and came back and said, okay, I've thought of 3 ways that we could do this. One would be to incorporate spiritual practices and make it more like biblical meditation while we do chair yoga. And one, I thought the people that are going to do chair yoga are usually retirees, and they need deep community. So what? And all of a sudden, they were having a robust discipleship conversation because we just took a flyer on restating our roots and inviting someone into it. What if we were that clear? Now, are we above the surface yet? Nope. Is this stuff vitally important? Absolutely. This is where we have to start. If you don't have those things, you will stay very, very busy in ministry. But it will be hard to know if you have gotten where God is calling you to be because we haven't decided what that is yet. It might be that you're asking somebody to make starfruit and they're not totally sure what it is. Now, those are internal. The last thing that we're going to have that's below the surface is external. To the root system. Trees are planted in soil. And soil is a quirky thing because you inherit what you didn't ask for in the soil. You ever try and dig a hole to plant a tree? You find all kinds of stuff. You can find roots. You can find blocks of rock that you did not know were there. I have no idea what the soil is like in Minnesota. But in Florida, if you dig too deep, you find water and creatures that want to kill you. I mean, it's just, Florida is a weird, weird place. But we have to own the quality of our soil. And we all inherited the quality of our soil. When you came into the church as a covenant partner or a pastor or an elder, you inherited a culture, you inherited systems, you inherited decision-making processes, you inherited ways of functioning that you did not create, but are in the soil. And what do we do when soil has clunk in it? You till it until it is ready to receive good roots. This is one of those processes in CFC that feels like nobody likes to talk about, but it is often the thing that begins to unlock transformation because we start to tinker with actual pragmatics of how we go about making decisions. So think about healthy seeds need the right environment, they need the right soil, and the soil either is encouraged or it resists deep roots. It's either rocky, it's like almost Jesus told a parable about this, and the soil will either receive the roots, and church size dynamics are going to impact your soil churches or your soil choices. So let me talk about this briefly. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. Everybody look at your chart and think about how many people are at your church on a Sunday, meaningfully engaged on a Sunday. Okay? Each of these quadrants is an element of your soil, whether we realize it or not. And part of what we do as church leaders is honor the way our soil is working already. So if you're a church of less than 50 on a Sunday, typically what that's like is a church that hires a pastor to be a chaplain. They are in charge of caring for and loving the family members, but the decision-making is usually 2 or 3 families of influence because they were the ones that put the church together in the first place. Is that bad? Not necessarily. It can be robustly healthy if there's good partnership there. But that's typically how those churches work. Now, what happens if the Lord blesses it and there's a numeric growth? It's not always the sign of God's blessing, but just hypothetically, the church grows and they get to be about 150. Those families of influence don't have time, and there's not organizational clarity to shepherd 150 people. So then the pastor takes on a primary leadership shepherding role. Now, I suspect a lot of us are in the more than 50, less than 150 category, yeah? Right? And so for pastors in the room, right, you've experienced this. Sally is in the hospital and 15 and a half people visited her before you. But if you did not visit her, the church did not come. Right? What is that? That is, we have gone from a group-centered, super organic, you see that top quadrant, to a pastor-centered, a leader-centered, but still organic. At less than 150, you can still communicate to everybody in the hallway. You can make sure everybody knows about the updates. People do text threads and all of a sudden the event is published and you don't have to worry about systems of redundancy with your communication patterns. This is where we live in less than 150. And people that study this and are smarter than me and write books say the hardest barrier to jump is to go over 150, because you stop being a pastor-led organic organization and you have to go back to being group-centered but organized. It's a hard jump. So we'll see in statistics that churches will go 165 to 135 to 172 to 143 and they just kind of teeter-totter around that because their systems, their soil, isn't set up to punch through. So if we think about a group-centered church, we're thinking about 350-ish max on a Sunday, and the primary way that people feel seen and known and cared for is not their direct connection to one lead pastor, it's their group. Their small group, the youth ministry, the camp ministry that they went to. But there's just there's an immediate group-centeredness to it. Whatever those groups are. The circles, right? God bless circles, right? So there's different things that we can connect to. You see where you are on your chart? Now, the last one can be a challenging one, right around the 350 mark. Some of us in the room are there. I think CPC would be over 350. I think Hope is hovering around 350 on a Sunday. Is that right, Melissa?
Ordering between program and corporate.
There you go. So when we start to get into corporate world, we go back to a leader-centered model, and that leader becomes rancher rather than primary shepherd, right? So they're the leader of leaders. If we ask Melissa to personally disciple 350 people, she's going to not sleep ever. But she is incredibly gifted to be a rancher, which means she is deeply connected with her leaders and still deeply connected with all the sheep, but it's different than when it was 150. Which one of these is holier soil than the others? You know the right answer. And which one do we think is holier soil than the other, right? So this is about honoring the soil that you didn't ask to have. This is just how people and systems work. And so if we don't honor that soil, then all of a sudden we'll find ourselves going back into a different quadrant that actually reflects the system we're giving. Now, it's not just church size dynamics. It's also governance. It's also process. We coached a church where the youth director wanted to tweak the way that confirmation was done. He felt like it was too high pressure evangelism. It felt pushy, and so people were making claims for Jesus without really answering all their questions because they felt like their mom would be disappointed if they didn't do it. And so he wanted to make the change, worked through the discernment process, put together a new plan, and presented it to his supervisor, and nobody could figure out whose job it was to approve the new plan. Because his supervisor was the pastor of discipleship, but the pastor of discipleship answered to the chair of the discipleship committee, which had a subcommittee for youth. That's the most Presbyterian thing anybody has ever said in their life. And so our youth director said, this needs to happen in order to disciple our kids well, and all of a sudden we have no way of knowing. Now, if you did the history and you did the soil, you would learn that church had a history of abusive leadership. And so their system was actually set up to make sure nobody had enough influence or power over anybody else. It was a stabilizing, safety-creating system. The problem with that is when the people who are held responsible don't have the authority to make decisions, then no growth and no mission accomplishment can happen. We just stay. Right? Now, if you just have somebody with all of the power and the authority to be held responsible for their decisions and don't hold that person accountable, then we have a tyrant who can do whatever they want. So part of what we're looking at in governance is, are the people that you're holding responsible also, do they have the ability to make decisions and to lead? And are there processes and procedures in place to hold your leaders accountable to lead in healthy ways and to accomplish the mission that is in your roots and in your DNA? Anybody overwhelmed with structure yet? What I hope you're seeing is that this is not a quick fix. We are way out of mechanic land. We're in cultivation territory. And so it's a slow process over years to tinker with the structure and the health of a church. I'm doing it quickly, but this is slow. Right? We have a culture of everybody coming in late to a staff meeting and you want to change it. Is that something you can do in 2 weeks? Nope. Is that something that's probably your fault that you set? Yes. But we try to change over time. How do I incentivize? Do we change the time? Does it actually conflict with their other obligations? And you start to tinker and play so that the culture shifts. The soil matters. No, okay, questions about soil. I think we're done talking about mud. But questions, muddiest point, where are we at? Okay, let's look at our questions, and then I'm going to ask you one. If this feels like something you want to tinker with, there are resources with ECO. There's a governance process that they help churches go through. And oftentimes elders can get scared or skittish because they don't want anybody to become a tyrant in their church. And that's right, we should, because power corrupts, and that's a whole thing. You can kind of read that story all throughout Scripture. But the goal is not to give you the correct governance. That's a mechanic. The goal is to equip everyone to discern what's the right relationship. What can a pastor decide to do on their own as the head of staff? What needs session approval? What conversations have to be in session? What conversations should actually be in staff? I know that your churches have never gotten into territory wars between staff and session. That's never happened. But just hypothetically, if it's not clear what we ask the staff to do and what we ask elders to do, then we might recruit the wrong people for the wrong roles. You ever have somebody get to be an elder because they thought they were going to be staff? Whew! It's a fun conversation. But this is why we need clarity here. And ECO will help us discern as we go. Okay, we're going to do one more, and then I think, what time do we take a break, Judy? 10? 10, great. Okay, we're going to land that plane at 10 o'clock. So, are you drinking deeply from the fire hose yet? Okay, again, you're going to get this on paper, and your job is not to master this by the end. This is a survey of a years-long process that ECO is trying to instill in our DNA as a movement. So this is just a way to whet your palate for what could be. So, we have our tree. We have planted a seed in the ground. We've tilled the soil around the seed. We've watered it. It's sunk roots deep down in. What's the first thing that springs up? A teeny tiny little shoot. We call it a trunk, but that's a cute term for it, right? Like the first little shoot is just, it's tender. It's lovely, it's vibrant, it's excited, it's not hardened yet, right? Think about the first time that you walked into your leadership role at your church and you're like, I am ready, right? Like, this is that moment. But the first thing that comes out of the ground are leaders. And the job of the trunk, the job of the leader is to carry the DNA and the nutrients up and be visible. Oh. The job of a leader is not to just be around the longest. The job of the leader is to take the DNA and make it visible, to own collectively the calling and the mission of the church and live it publicly so that it can be watched. That's the job of the leader. Now, trunks are fascinating. Again, Caitlin and Dana, they did a whole lot of research on trees, but apparently this is how a trunk works. There's a middle part that's heartwood. It's hard. It's not dead, but it's not totally alive either. It's just really hard. This is the stuff that has rings around it. And then on the right outside the heartwood is a layer called sapwood. That is the part of a tree that is vibrant. And right outside of it is the vascular system where water comes up and down and nutrients come up and down. And every year, the sapwood becomes hardwood after growing new sapwood. That metaphor is too good to not say again. So the leaders that are sapwood, every year, they create another layer of sapwood, and then they have permission to become hardwood. Leaders replicate themselves. They don't just replicate ministries. They replicate leaders. And so when we are looking at a healthy tree, we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is actually cultivating more leaders. So now, this is a silly question, but I hope will become helpful as I ask it. Who's a leader in your church? What are the roles that are leaders? Out loud. Don't overthink it. Thank you. Pastors. Okay, great. They are leaders. Sweet Lord, I hope so. Who else is a leader in your church as a role? Elders and deacons, for sure. We ordain them, right? Those are officers of the church. Who else?
Volunteers.
Volunteers? Which ones? Small group leaders?
Yeah, small group leaders.
Okay.
The worship team.
Yeah. How about the volunteers that serve in their kitchen ministries? Are they leaders? Okay. And so how about Sunday school teachers? Okay. So which roles that are volunteer roles in your church are open to people who aren't ready to be leaders yet? Like a case study, somebody comes in and they're not totally sure what they believe about Jesus, but they're intrigued by him, and they really love the community. They want to be part of it, and so they see that you've adopted this foster care ministry, and well, I think kids are important. Can I go serve in that capacity? If they're a leader in the church, what's their job? To represent the DNA of the church. They don't even know Jesus yet. They can't be a leader. Can they serve? Please, I hope so. Right? Okay? So what we want to think through in this category is there's the definition of leader, that you're a person of influence in the church. Everybody's a leader in that point. We sort of created a culture where to say that you're just a covenant partner is almost bad. We want to actually create clarity to say there needs to be a certain group of people that have a job description of replicating your DNA. And that can't be everybody. That's a unique part of your congregation. That's the part where you start expecting them to uphold the essential tenets. That's the part where they need to have a maturity about them. And there need to be places in your ministry where people who aren't leaders grow, play, serve, get involved. We can't make that decision for you. Right? But classic arguments, you've heard all of this. Does the guitar player in your band need to be a leader who holds to everything that your church believes? I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Does the worship leader? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. All the worship leaders are getting nervous because I'm picking up all the controversial things people fight about. But this is a thing. This is a conversation. Who serves in youth ministry as a volunteer? Who's a Sunday school teacher with kids? So to think really clearly about the difference between a volunteer and a leader helps us stay organized on what our expectations are. And so then we think about, from our volunteers, from our people that are involved, how do we identify, equip, and deploy new leaders? How do we create new sapwood? In your church, do we have an intentional process of identifying those folks? Anybody ever served? This one might hit too close to home, but we're going to try. Who's served on elder nominating committees before? Right? Okay, so elder nominating committees are the time where we look around and say, we remember we're all Presbyterian, right? And so we're an elder-led church. And so we look around and we say, who we got? Right? Who's got time? Who's rotated off for a year so they can rotate back on? Who's interested? Right? Like, listen, I've got PTSD from these meetings, and then you start to just look at the directory and start with the A's. Let's just work our way down. Or do you have a pool of people that have been intentionally formed through a process of identification and development so that they aren't necessarily elders right now, but they're ready to be deployed as leaders in your church in some capacity? And you've so clearly identified that pipeline and that environment that all of the leaders are embodying those marks of eldership before they come up before the nominating committee. Could you imagine what that would be like? There's a church in San Antonio that has a 10-month leadership development process. Now, that might be too much infrastructure for your church, but they invite people that have leadership potential to go through that before they ever show up on a nominating team. So you're going to be our small group leader. You're going to be volunteering in the kids ministry. We want you to go through this leadership year. We're going to invest in you. And when you come out the other side, that we keep record of everybody that's in that pool. And when the nominating committee comes up, that's all they look at. And they can do it with confidence. Those become easy conversations. Imagine that. That'd be so much fun. Oh, man. A lot of people are starting to develop CLPs, commissioned lay pastors. I'm so grateful for who is Buck here, who walked us through all of the new Presbyterian acronyms. Bless you. And so they are just refresh every year. Mercy's new every morning. And same with acronyms. But that's an intentional way of forming leaders. Maybe in your church you have a certain threshold where to be volunteer staff you need to be a CLP. That could be fun. But how clear is your leadership trunk? Do we have the right leaders in the right role to carry our vision out? To what extent are our leaders aligned with each other and the vision and mission and pulling in the same direction? Can I tell, are we recording this? I'll tell a story without names. I served a church once upon a time, and I've served 3, so you don't know which one it is. So we were in a meeting, and there were other pastors involved, 1 or more, and there were other staff involved, 1 or more. And we had set forth, hey, we're going to do this discipleship thing, but we're nervous about how the church is going to respond to it. Can we get some feedback about having this conversation? It was around issues of race and the gospel and justice, and like how do we like pastor people through this? And so we presented it to the staff, and we asked for feedback, but we wanted to give them space to answer anonymously so that they could, be honest. And so they wrote down on an index card and handed it in, and it said, how can we trust that the pastors actually are in agreement with each other before we go on a limb? That hit me so hard. Because they see it, right? Our folks don't see everything, but they can feel it enough to know that there's just slight differences, just enough to pit mom against dad, right? Kids do this. Right? This is just intuitive human behavior. That's how kids behave. They try and find their wedge issue to get what they need from mom or dad. The trunk matters deeply with alignment to a shared calling, to the roots, and to each other. That's why we got to be very, very intentional about who is a leader in our churches. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me pause. We're over halfway done, but where are we, and what questions or what thoughts are coming to mind before we take a break?
Tim, earlier when you talked about the soil,
Yep.
and for that matter with regard to the trunk,
Yep.
as a long-term member of my church and having been involved in the Presbytery a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people who's especially sensitive to a church with regard to its peace, unity, and purity.
Absolutely.
You want to comment on that with regard to the soil versus the trunk?
Yes, but unpack it just one more layer for me so I know what I'm talking about.
I'm talking about secret agendas, gossip,
Yeah.
comments about the pastor behind his or her back.
Yep. Absolutely.
2 or 3 families getting together and forming a nexus which may be working against what the session is promoting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had, I've been in a church where there was the power committee, there was the shadow session, and then the actual session, right? Just hypothetically, again, you've never had that problem, but just hypothetically. There was the group of people where the real decisions were made, and then there was the room where we publicly rubber stamped everything. And if you didn't convince those people, and that was easier to navigate because it was public, everybody knew that was the shadow committee. What my brother here is talking about is what happens when there's a hidden agenda that's in the parking lot, and they've got a bone to pick, and they've been here longer than that pastor, and they will be here long after that pastor, and they, so help me, will not allow that pastor, right? When we do the longer process, we describe leadership change dynamics. And one of my favorite mantras is leading change is disappointing people at a rate they can absorb. It's a Howard Heifetz quote. I didn't come up with it. But what we're describing is the leader's job is to lead. God called you to lead. You don't ask permission, you lead. You don't domineer. You're not a tyrant. So you steward a group of people, and we have to uncover over time where that gossip is, where that stuff is. And so there's ways we can do that. One of it is to get so healthy in other spots that it becomes very clear that this is starting to not fit with where the rest of the healthy culture is. So I've tilled this soil enough that root is starting to stand out. One of my favorite moments was we had a culture of some unhealth, of parking lot conversations and just a lot of unresolved conflict. And when an elder called out another elder in the meeting for their bitterness, I was like, oh, yes, now we're getting somewhere, because the system is starting to fight for health. You can't force that. The Spirit has to do that over time. But that's why we till where you can and make that as healthy as you can to see if it'll start to leak. The other way is you might have to chop roots. I mean, no doubt about it. There might be a moment of confrontation to lovingly call someone to Christ, not to lovingly push someone out, right? To say, hey, this is our DNA. This is not how Jesus called us to ask. And that's the challenging part of a shepherd, is to know the difference between a sick sheep and a wolf. They need two different things. Sick sheep can be healed and brought back into the fold. Wolves have to be protected against. I don't know. Both of them can gossip. Both of them can have secret agendas. Both of them can fight in a different direction against. So they can be functionally the same, but they are responded to slightly differently. And that's the stuff that keeps me up at night, man. I don't know. Did that get anywhere close to your question? Yeah. This is why this is hard, and this is why we pray our guts out. Because at the end of the day, there's stuff that I'll never know unless God reveals it. He's got to have a bigger stake in the game of creating healthy soil than I do. What else? Great question. Yes?
I would just not try to say this question exactly.
Yeah.
But like, when I think about cultivating leaders, often I think about like, there has to be capacity and time to make that happen.
Yes.
And just what is the balance of that look like when like, there is limited time and limited capacity, but like those leadership roles do need to be filled or like whatnot. Like, how do you balance those things? Like, is it better to like, not form like a leadership role until like, there is capacity to make people feel that?
What do you think?
I feel like I have been very, like, thankfully I've been in circles where cultivation has been like a really big thing. So often I feel like for me, I'm like, let's not, like I'm more prone to be like, let's wait until like we can get this. I also want on the Enneagram, so it's like, let's do this the right way. And like but then that can lead to me, I feel like being too slow. Like, but there needs to be some momentum happening. You can have participants grow in a leadership role.
Yep.
Like, you know.
Yeah. What you're describing is a tension to manage, not a formula to solve.
What do you mean by that?
There's no way to be a leader without being one. You learn leadership as you're given leadership responsibility, right? I mean, like, you can read books, but over time, you learn it as you're entrusted with it, and you're never ready. And we have also seen what happens when you put someone who's really not ready in a leadership role. When their giftedness doesn't match their character, right? Like, you've seen those things where like somebody who's just super compelling but doesn't have the spiritual maturity to do the thing. So what you're naming are two things to be held in tension, and it's always a conversation and never a formula. If we get formulaic about it, that's like saying, when's the right time to ask your kids to trust Jesus? I don't know. Talk to me about your kids, right? So when is the right time to have somebody be an elder? When is the right time to have them? That's such a great pastoral question, but it needs names and faces and stories attached to it. So I love it. Keep asking the question. I'm so glad you're a leader, truly. That's a good leadership question. Yeah. Okay, let's take, are we doing 10 minutes? 15 minutes? 10 minutes, and then you might take 15, okay? So go use the restroom. We're going to start at 10:15, okay? Bye. Curtis, this is nice. I like the TV on the floor.
Yeah, I saw that too. What a good idea.
That's a whole vibe. I'm digging this.
It was the solution to like the big churches having a projector like out in the audience.
Well, it's really, I feel spoiled. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And my church would appreciate the timer. So just, that's good right here. Just so the shut up Tim timer is really important. Oh man, we're starting to get into cross-cultural dynamics and getting into backgrounds of Hispanic culture. And it is so funny to watch my Cuban pastor preach. And anybody from Hispanic background's like, what? He preached for 45 minutes, who cares? But then all of the white people are like, a sermon is 25 minutes and you're done. Yeah. So it's been fun to say, how do we steward the environment and all that? It's really fun. Oh, I have a laser pointer. Cool. Yes.
Okay, do you want me to go around them up again?
That would be great. All right, y'all, let's come on in. So as you guys are coming in, make sure you get an unnecessarily large piece of paper. That's right, yes. Yes, listen, this is, somebody was referring to their readers last night. They will remain nameless, but this is all for that one. So that's right. Hey, before we jump into branches, something that I thought of that might be helpful. We were talking about hidden agendas. In a vision framing process, one of the things we do is talk about the lower room and the upper room in church conversations. Both are necessary. So sometimes we just say upper room equals good, lower room equals bad. But in this metaphor, lower room is where the entrance is, but upper room is where the goal is. And so what we say is most people, when they come to your church, connect with you for one of four reasons. They either are connecting with you because of the place, like my granddaddy built the organ, or it's in my neighborhood, or something about the place, something about the people, the friendships that they've built, the programs of the church, some sort of way they engaged, or the personality of a leader, one of them. It could be a personality of a leader who used to be there and is no longer there, but they connect to a personality of a leader. And what happens is without vision, the proverb, people perish. Okay, so snarky leadership moment. Without vision, people cherish. They take one of those four things and they turn it into the identity of the church. The past leaders, the program, the place, or the people. Now, what's the problem with that? All four of those things change. No matter what. People age. Programs stop an effectiveness cycle because culture changes around them. People move. Leaders take new calls or go to be with Jesus. There's nothing that stays stable about those four things. And so the job of our discipleship ministries is to take people who enter into the lower room, but we create shared language and processes to bring them to a shared purpose, a common mission. If we don't have a common mission, I forget who I stole this from, but it relates to me because of my kids. They said, a church without mission is like toddlers who've been inside too long. Stuff starts to break. You need outside energy for littles, and churches need something outside themselves that they feel called to. Otherwise, we really do start to fight each other rather than fight for a common purpose. So that's another one that's just proactive health that can help you till the soil, is by working through that. Now, let's talk branches. Within that conversation, branches are not seeds. Ministries, programs are not the identity and the DNA of the church. Can I get a witness? Right? They feel like it, especially given your, different church size dynamics. But the branches serve a purpose. They are not the purpose. If you've ever interacted with a tree, what do branches do? Thank you. Feel that in my bones. What do they do with the stake of the tree? They hold two things. They hold swings. Love that. They hold leaves, swings, and fruit. We're going to figure out a way to bring swings into this. Don't listen. I will. But right, so the job of the branches is to support, encourage, foster, stabilize the leaves and the fruit. They serve a purpose outside themselves. And so they can be evaluated for effectiveness. We having fun? So when we look at the branches of a ministry, they support the leaves and the fruit. They carry the soil, the water from the soil to the leaves. And then, we're going to talk about this more, they carry the food from the leaves to the rest of the tree. They do both. Apparently there's a thing from 8th grade science class called photosynthesis, where the leaves, we'll see in a minute, are the way the tree breathes. So you take water from the roots, and it comes up through the branches. You take in the way a tree breathes from the leaves, and then you pass that down to the rest of the tree, and it flows through the branches. Branches are very important, but they are not the goal. They serve the goal. Okay? And so then we have, to name the thing, mango tree branches look different than oak tree branches, which look different than apple tree branches. I have no idea what fruit is native to Minnesota. Can somebody help me? Apples. Great. Apple, right, when it's apple season, right, those look very different than orange trees. Orange trees can be kind of little and cute. And then even different types of apples have different looking trees. And so your programs and our ministries should be unique to our seeds, our roots, our calling. They are there to accomplish and serve the mission of the church. Okay? So when we want to think about 3 different areas of ministry, these are not programs themselves, these are categories. But in a church, how do we adopt people in? What are the systems and the environments, not even just the programs, but where are the places and the locations where someone is welcomed into exploring Jesus? This could be an alpha course. It could be how you welcome new covenant partners. It could be an onboarding to small group ministries. Some people have like an 8-week universal immersion before they go into small groups. There's all sorts of ways that we can have adoption ministries, from disconnected to connected. And then we need to make sure that we also have ministries, environments, places, locations where people deepen their roots. They learn how to pray. Oh, dear Lord, people don't know how to pray. The dirty secret is most of us pastors don't know how to pray either, right? But we're all learning. But where do we actually help people explore and play with the spiritual practices? Where do we have them explore and play with being vulnerable with people when they're not used to being vulnerable with people? So we have discipling, growing ministries. And then we want to have mission ministries that actually equip people to live out their faith in and day out. Now, a program could serve more than one purpose, right? Your youth ministry might be aimed at trying to do all 3. Your small group ministry might be aimed at discipleship and mission. I don't know. My question for you is, do we know for our own church? What's the stated purpose of this particular ministry? What's the thing that this particular environment is trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do on Sundays? What are we trying to do on Tuesday morning Bible study? Rather than just run the legacy program, we have to think through what it serves in terms of its the wider mission of the church and the wider function of the tree. Now, when we start doing that, the challenge is, and the scary thing is we start to do this thing that we all know and love in the Bible called pruning. Branches are pruned. Do you know what you do with branches that aren't pruned? You cut them. In the Bible, I'm the vine, you're the branches, right? If you abide in me, right? John 15, Jesus says, if you abide in me, congratulations, I'm going to prune you. If you don't abide in me, congratulations, I'm going to cut you. Everybody gets cut. but I'm a people pleaser, and I'm an Enneagram 6, and so I can tell you the 80,000 ways this is going to go poorly. And so I get timid about pruning. Or I'm just too tired and don't want to deal with, Richard, who's going to flip out, and I don't want the email. And so, right, we all have been there. But healthy gardeners see something growing and prune it so it keeps growing. And so healthy leaders look at something that's growing and prune it to keep it growing. Otherwise, it stays where it's at. So, what does it look like to approach pastorally, lovingly, but boldly and clearly to prune our ministries? I want to give you a couple of ways to think about it. Think about it in terms of rhythm rather than in terms of constancy. So even in gardening world, you weed regularly. You pull weeds. Come to find out, that doesn't happen automatically. Who knew? We have to pull weeds from our garden. Like it feels like every week, like something just new pops up. Now, if we're chopping down trees every week, we're going to run out of things that are living in our front yard pretty quick. So pulling weeds on a regular basis is making the micro adjustments in our ministries to make sure they stay effective. But if you never do tree trimming, if we never cut back dead branches, if we never do the bigger work, then we have eventually a dilapidated looking garden, right? So is there a rhythm in our churches of intentional celebration of how God is at work, evaluation of ways to stay more aligned or grow more aligned with what God is doing, and then prune and keep going? Now notice what I did not say in any part of that verse was what's happening that's, quote, wrong. Pruning's not actually a punishment. It's a celebration of growth and a cultivation of continued growth. And so we've got to rephrase this kind of mentality, and it can be challenging. One of the moments for me, we put a leadership pipeline in place in our church. It's a similar thing. I didn't know San Antonio did it, but we had this 10-month thing, and we're new to it. So what we've decided is that every elder is required to either have gone through it or to go through it in their first year. And so that's a commitment we made, and I walked through the experience. It starts with emotional health and goes through all of the competencies. It's like my wife worked for the ordination process or something. It's great. And so we walked through this whole thing. We call it the Kairos Leadership Cohort. It's really fun. It's branded well. And so we put this all together, and the elders loved it. He was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. I can't wait to do it. This is going to be great. And then the next year, the elder nominating committee named their people, and one of the ones said, I can serve as an elder, but I don't have time to do the cohort. And I said, that makes total sense. Let's wait until next year. And my elder said, are you telling me that Tom is not capable of being an elder in our church? What happened? Everything was all fine and dandy until we pruned something. I pulled a weed. And it wasn't a weed that I created arbitrarily. It was me holding the line that the elders themselves voted on. But it's harder to hold it when it starts to cost us something. So when we do pruning, I want us to name the stuff. We always say that people fear change. The secret of leadership, that if you get nothing else, people don't feel change. They feel loss. If you found $100 in the atrium, if you found $1,000 in the atrium, hypothetically, that would change your day. I don't think anybody would complain. That would be a welcomed change for most of us. I'm going to pay down some debt. I'm going to go, I'm going to do some things. I don't know what it is, but that's a welcomed change. There are positive changes in our life. Some people are expecting kids coming. That's going to be probably a mixture of both. But overall, I'm excited to have more kids. There's positive changes. What makes leadership hard is when we intentionally make decisions that result in loss for people. Because then we are the embodiment of the loss they feel. And a shepherd is simultaneously willing to say, I know it's hard, keep following me, not in a self-aggrandizing way, but in a shepherding way. And I see that you're hurting, dear sheep, let me snuggle. That's a hard balance to strike. But again, if we're just mechanics, it's a win-win. Your car's broken, I can fix it. We'll have our arrangement. You pay me, I'm your staff. We go about our ways. Everybody is happy with the arrangement. But if I'm a gardener, I've got to break the bad news that the tree is never going to look the same because a frost hit it. And so now we've got to start with this teeny tiny little shoot and over time grow it. Or I've got to break the bad news that branch that we love and it created the perfect shade, but the leaves haven't been on it in 4 years. And I'm not saying we're done. I'm just saying we've got to adjust something. Right? So when we think about loss, I want you to think about in your churches the last time that somebody had a disproportionate reaction. Again, it's probably never happened in your church that somebody disproportionately reacted to one of your decisions. But just hypothetically, when that happened, think less, I now know who the Disney villain is. Right? Right? Because those conversations feel good. But we need to think less that and think more, what loss are they feeling? What are they fighting against? It might not be as personal as it feels. It might be that they feel the instability of people that they don't know making decisions that they weren't a part of. That's very threatening to somebody who has felt like they were the mover and shaker in a church for 20 years. It feels unsafe. What direction are they going to take it? And so then they can lash via email or in person. Right? Loss of control. There's an interim period and nobody knows what's going to happen or who's going to be in charge, and they keep saying to wait and to pray, and that sounds great for 3 weeks. Up into when we get 3 months, we get into 12 months. Like, what is going on? And it feels like we're losing control. And I like to be in control. Control feels safe. Control feels like if everybody did what I wanted to do most of the time, we would all get along great. Or a loss of value. This one's big in my context when we're naming things like revitalization and we're celebrating things like growth in next generation ministries. There's a 75-year-old that says, but do you still see me? And do I still matter? I'm not new and flashy. Every part of my life tells me that I'm retired to go away. Right? Kids used to be the be seen, not heard. Now it's almost the reverse. Seniors, be seen and not heard. Support financially, but don't touch anything. Right? So people feel this loss of value, and then a loss of comfort. Now, we're good Presbyterians, and so we can say any of those things become an idol. Any of those things can replace God, and so then people can disproportionately react. And so it's right for us to invite people, to challenge people in those ways. It would behoove us to do it compassionately because we are also idol makers as well. Right? So this is a beggar talking to another beggar, like, I get it. And this is going to be hard, and I'm going to be as compassionate and as connected with you as I can. There's a great book called Canoeing the Mountains, and then I'm going to see your hand. If you haven't read Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger, read it. If you have read it, read it again. What he would say is start with conviction, stay calm, stay connected, stay the course. Start with conviction. You got to have a clear purpose and direction and everything we've talked about. And then when people get reactive, stay calm. It's the system doing what the system is supposed to do. Stay connected with them. Otherwise, we got no shot of staying together, peace, unity, and purity of the church. But stay the course. Sometimes you got to lovingly look somebody in the eye and say, I know that's really hard. It's really hard. I'm sorry. And we've got to do it for the sake of the mission. I'm not doing it to be mean to you. I'm doing it because we've been called. Does that make sense? Talk to me.
Speak the truth in love.
Yeah, 100%. Some of us in the room need to be challenged to speak the truth. Some of us get a little timid. We're caregivers at heart, and so we don't want to disrupt people, and so we try and quietly do it rather than disruptively do it. Some of us in the room need to be reminded in love. Right? And if you get a good team, those people come together and encourage each other. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment because I've thought of this often. Is in the upper Midwest, I hear a lot those three, was it Rotary Club? I heard how many, is it kind, is it true, is it necessary? I used to say sort of snarkily, well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But I heard a good quote from Eco staff, I think, where they said clarity
Is kindness.
Clarity is kindness, and I think that is, I'll just leave that.
Mm-hmm.
So, because, how can you speak the truth in love? Sometimes it doesn't come off as kind. But,
Sometimes it helps me to think in the metaphor of relationships and dating and marriage, right? Wherever you are in that world, whether it's you've got a best friend or a spouse or kids, there's a sense where some of us instinctually try and hide for the sake of the other one. Does that ever work? I mean, think about but we still do it instinctively. So clarity is kindness because you can only connect with people in reality. And so if we're trying to create a false reality around them just to appease them, that's actually more distancing than lovingly connecting with them to just name what is. A leader's job so often is to just name reality and let it be hard. So in a session meeting, when you know that you've got to make the tough decision and you know that there's competing values from my Knox people, right? There's two things that are held in tension and they're both good and not both of them can't win at the same time. Do we have coffee in the sanctuary or do we value reverence in the sanctuary? Is hospitality and reverence good biblical values? And at a certain point, you got to make a call on whether we can have coffee. And so then we just name the tension, and then as a pastor, let your team feel the weight rather than solve it for them. Let them wrestle, and then at a certain point, you make a call and help the people that held the other value grieve. Yeah, I get it. It matters. A tension we regularly feel is, do you have a prelude where everybody sits quietly, worshipfully, contemplatively, or do we have the chaos of kids doing wind sprints around the sanctuary? Now, if you've met my kids, they made that decision for us. But that matters. Those are the kinds of conversations that get to become fun. Okay? Now, I'll talk about that stuff for days, but I want to land this plane because we got some stuff to do to discern. So leaves. This is a growing trend right now, thanks be to God. But Eco wanted to make very, very clear to not take for granted the spiritual practices of a church at a congregational level, at a group level, and at an individual level. If you've read Acts 2, they got together and devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to prayer. And then they broke bread in each other's homes, so they devoted themselves to hospitality. And they did all sorts of things together. The spiritual practices of an individual are how you breathe spiritually. The spiritual practices of a church are how we breathe spiritually. Now, Caitlin has given us this helpful slide that says they do energy production from the sun, they do respiration that sustains growth. Think about three categories. So many of us have these three categories, we name it different things. Grow, go, or no, grow, go. Up, in, out. We have drill deep, raise up, extend out, whatever. But you need to connect with God. You need to connect with people. You need to go on mission. So you need to have practices that fit in those categories. Now, what can happen is you're a leader and you only have so much time. And so you mention every once in a while in your sermons, by the way, y'all should be praying. But what if we were intentional about creating rhythm? Not necessarily legalism, but rhythm to our spiritual practices. This used to be what the liturgical calendar did. Now, some of our churches still do that, and some of us don't, but you still need rhythm, no matter what. And so what are our rhythms individually, as teams, especially leadership teams, as a congregation? Think about all the things you could do, right? Prayer of examine, to equip people to do a prayer of prayer of examine people? Anybody love doing this? Anybody said examine? Well, I haven't done that since high school. It's a way of spiritually reviewing the day. Where did you see God at work? Where do you have consolation that you were in line with God? Where did you feel disconnected from God or feel a sense of desolation in your soul? And then you pause and sit with it and say, Lord, what's the invitation for me to see based on my day? Now that sounds monastic. And I have 3 little kids. So at the dinner table, we say, what was your favorite part of the day? And then we say, what was the hardest part of the day? You ask a 4-year-old what the hardest part of the day is, crazy thing is, they will answer you. And it often is about what you said to them. I'm like, oh man, yep, they're right. And so it became this, all of a sudden we're doing a spiritual rhythm as a family. And it's because my wife is awesome and she knows what she's doing and started this practice. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're doing examine and they don't even know what it's called. But think creatively. How could you invite every age, every group to do rhythms of spiritual practices? This alone is a whole process to get this in our church's bones. Anybody run the Practicing the Way stuff? That's that kind of up and coming John Mark Comer. We got some nods of heads, right? He's sort of the tip of the spear on this, but there are other resources out there. Rich Velotis has some great stuff. He was an Eco National Gathering speaker. Would love for you to check out that. There's just a lot that's here. I'll give you this slide, and this chart is helpful. If we're getting practical, like who does a calendar planning day to look for the year ahead on like when's VBS and what are we doing for Advent? Anybody do that? Good. Okay. So glad we're just running it back every year, baby. So what if when you do your pruning, your annual pruning where you evaluate ministries, you also look ahead to say, what do we feel like the Lord's inviting us to this year? Do we need to do a digital fast in our church because it's an election cycle and everybody just needs to take a breath? Do we need to do an actual food fast because people get skittish and have stopped realizing how much their bodies were made for? So I don't know. But we discern our leaves. If you can't breathe, how long do you get to stay alive? Not long. If a tree doesn't have leaves, we usually call it either dormant or dead. Now I'm talking to a bunch of Minnesotans, so every winter, I assume, no leaves are around. And so it's a great act of faith to think, I think those leaves are coming back. And so it's not that this is consistency, it's not legalism, there's pace and rhythm to this, but there needs to be pace and rhythm to this, okay? Now, if we have done our job, and if we have worked our way through all of this, then we come to the question of fruit again. We have seeds that have become roots in a soil, that have come up to a trunk, that have spread out into branches, that have soaked in the air and the sun through leaves. What did Jesus say? A good tree produces good fruit. That's just how it works. Now, the fruit doesn't necessarily mean that your good tree becomes a megachurch. But it does mean that if we're faithful, then lives can be changed as we do that. So the way I want you to think about roots connecting to fruit is when we do this work well, your root system is the vision discerned. What is the fruit that's going to grow on this tree? This is a star fruit seed. And I didn't even know that star fruit was real. So if I've learned how to cultivate star fruit, at the end of the day, I should see star fruit. And I've set up everything in between to cultivate it. You want to reach the next generation? Great. How is your church set up structurally to do that? The hardest thing that I hear, and it makes me mad every time I hear it, but it's so true, and I'm saying it right now, and I can't believe I'm saying it, but we are set up right now to produce the fruit we are experiencing right now. Trees are good at that. The way we're operating right now is exactly correct for the fruit that we're receiving right now. Now, we don't control the fruit. We are a gardener, right? All of those things. There's a humility to this. We don't say how much, or there's so much that's outside of our control. Frost, environment, different sorts of things happen. But there's also a sense of be faithful in the work. So really quick, let's talk about measuring, because this is the part that can create some angst, and then we're going to discern. When we measure fruit, people can get uncomfortable because the word measuring feels legalistic. When we did this process at my church, we realized that we had very few corporate spiritual practices. We did a lot of stuff encouraging people individually. We didn't do a whole lot together in prayer. And so we said, we're going to change all of that. We're going to do a year that we called the 1,000 Hours of Prayer. And the idea was every person was going to pray for 10 minutes a week on the same topic every week. And if everybody in our church did that, we'd have 1,000 hours of prayer invested into the life and ministry of the church. And I announced this to my leaders, thinking they were going to say, bless you, Pastor Tim. We are so grateful for your wisdom and for all of the ways that you love us by challenging and inviting us into this blessed spiritual practice. First question I got, you kidding me? You're going to measure my prayer life? Are we that church now? That we're just all about numbers and we're all about like hitting quotas, and isn't that legalistic? And I mean, woo! So first thing you have to think of is what was the loss? What was the loss? Control. Yeah, because now somebody sees you when you're sleeping. He knows, right? Like all of a sudden I am the worst. I'm the Grim Reaper of Christmas something, right? So like that was a whole vibe. But then there's also the sense of inadequacy, insecurity, Oh, now people are going to realize that I actually don't know what I'm doing. And so we had to create the normalcy, but the act of measurement did its job. That was actually the hard part, is to say, we're having this conversation because we started measuring. We never would have had the conversation if we didn't put a number on a wall. We don't want to be numbers driven, but any gardener inspects the fruit. So we look at externals, not as the goal, but we look, we see what's the color, what's the size, how do we know that we're actually growing? Caitlin, when she ran her church through this, would put she loves a prop. So she put a thermometer, and you would drop a trinket every time somebody had a spiritual conversation outside the walls of the church. That was it. You just dropped a conversation. Right? We have a prayer wall on our church where you can tell an anonymous story of God showing up, and you clip it to the prayer wall. You can create ways of visibly showing fruit, and we want to create ways of helping people internally reflect. How are you different today than you were 6 months ago? Where is God at work in your life in ways that if we didn't encourage you to pause and evaluate your own soul, that we wouldn't ever uncover the stories? It takes intentionality, and it is discomforting. But it actually is very important that we do that. In the prayer campaign, what we ended up reframing, and the feedback was helpful, to say, okay, let's take it about, instead of counting hours, let's talk about it as giving fuel to mission. Everybody measures fuel. Of course you measure fuel before a road trip. So if God's taking us somewhere, we got to fuel up our prayer tank. Then all of a sudden we were off to the races. It was a fun conversation, okay? So if you think about your church, we all know we do ABCs, attendance, buildings, cash. We do nickels and noses. We do all the things that we count. But if that's the only thing we count, that's not fruit. So what are we looking at? How often do we track it? And what key measures could we look at besides those things, right? And so, again, we've got a discipleship vision and a congregational vision. So each one of those needs different types of measures, different things that we're tracking. You might even put it in a handy little chart like this. This is part of the pruning process, where our leaders know what fruit is. They have learned what star fruit is and what makes a good star fruit versus a bad one. And then they've learned to cultivate it. They've learned to do the weeding. And then we come alongside them with a coaching posture, with a loving posture, and help them trim trees that have fallen down. And then over time, and it takes years, we just might have a culture that can embrace pruning for the sake of more fruit. Ministry's easy. Right? Here's our questions. How have you done this in your churches? I want you to humble brag on yourself, okay? Where have you seen this go well?
Hillary had us put acorns on a tree when we had faith-building encounters with Jesus. Not to compare, but to invite engagement.
That's right. And not to compare with any other churches, but Hillary's apparently amazing. So there you go. That's no, that's lovely.
Oh, and rings of trunk trees to also show that.
Yeah.
Makes sense if you see it.
I love it. Sounds great. Sounds great. That's the kind of stuff that makes it just playful enough that it doesn't feel legalistic, but just galvanizing enough that's like, oh man, that tree trunk is staring at me and I haven't put a ring on it yet.
You can count it.
Yeah.
You can count the acorns in the tree.
Now, we'll nerd out later, but for those of you that do your hey, thanks for giving money to the church, tell a couple of those stories. Say, when you invested in Hope Church, look at the impact that you've made. That's a wildly different conversation than thanks for helping us pay the light bill. Yeah. Where else has this gone well? Okay. So here's what we're going to do. For our last few minutes, we're going to reflect. So to get your unnecessarily large piece of paper, turn it over. It's reflection time, discussion time.
If you don't have one, let me know.
per my usual, I probably talked a little too much. So we're going to do a little bit of reflection. We may go over about 5 minutes. I'm so sorry, Judy. I want you to look at the back where there are statements. And we're going to multitask. As this is happening, you're going to get a red sticky note and a green one. So the first thing I want you to do is look at each column and circle the 2 statements that best reflect your church from your perspective. It's the one with multiple boxes, not just the long descriptions. So you'll see multiple statements, 4 different boxes. Looks like this. So each box has more than one statement. You're just going to circle 2 statements. They don't have to be in the same box. But for every color, circle 2. For every column, every color, circle 2 statements on your big piece of paper. And while you're there, you can see it on the slide. Name your church's strongest component on the green sticky note, just a little note. The seeds, the root. And then just like, hey, I think our strongest thing is our leaves because we have acorns and tree columns that really encourage, right? So just a little note. What we're going to do is take all of those sticky notes and we're going to create a Presbytery heat map. So we can see where God is seeing flourishing in all of our churches and where we see opportunities for growth. So which one is your strongest? Put it on a green sticky note. And which one is a growing edge? Put on the red sticky note. Does that make sense? Clear as mud. That's great. This is why we can't have nice things. Joel, can I impose on you? Can you check in with people, and when they're done with their sticky notes, go throw them up on the charts back there. Joel's going to take your sticky notes once you're done. If you just want to raise them up, he'll grab them.
Thanks.
As it's happening, everybody look at the wall. What do you see? I know you haven't read the stories, but what do you see?
Solid roots with less fruit.
Solid roots, but less fruit. Yeah, could be. What else do we see? How about this? I see two people who are worried about their vision, and 4 churches that know how to serve and connect with them.
Say that again.
I see 2 people that are worried about their roots and their vision, and 4 that just might know how to be a friend in that journey. I see 4 churches that really love their spiritual practices that might want to have a conversation with 2. Some churches that have done hard work to learn what their seeds are. And lo and behold, not one of these categories is all green. Congratulations, you're human. Before you take communion, or after, I don't know how communion's going to flow. Do we take it in here? Okay. Where do you stand when we take it? Right here? Here's going to be the traffic flow. I have no idea if this works or not, but I'm going to ask you. We're going to do communion in a minute. We have 10 more minutes before we land this plane, friends. But before you take communion, I want you to walk past that wall. And we're going to let that be our little prayer wall. And just read those stories and pray to the Lord of the harvest that we keep growing and stay on our journeys and then come to the table. That's the fruit of the vine. So that we can remember that this is the business of Jesus, to take what was dead and bring it to life, to take what's unhealthy and heal it, to take what feels overwhelmed and discouraged and to befriend. That's our Savior. Now that's Presbytery. What we're going to do right now is going to be the beginning of a conversation that will take a long time for you to unpack, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. But I want you to think about your church. And I'm going to give you just a few minutes to briefly chat with each other in your church. There's 4 broad categories. And I've got a chart for you on a similarly obnoxiously large piece of paper that walks you through these 4 categories. But given what you just filled out, think about where your church is at. Are we asking in your church, hey, we're doing okay. We're seeing life. People are flourishing. We're not on all cylinders. There's still things that need to be tweaked. And so we need resources. We need some of these tools to help us continue the journey. We need to be pruned to keep producing fruit by God's grace. Then it might be that you want to take wherever your church feels like we need the most amount of resources and check in with ECO. We need to look at our soil. What do we have resources-wise? We need to do spiritual practices. What's that John Mark Comer cohort again? And discern what's a next step for which resource you need. Maybe for y'all, you're realizing, we don't just need more resources. We're not currently humming. We're not experiencing growth. We're actually experiencing decline. We're doing more funerals than baptisms. We haven't seen somebody come to faith in 10 years. It might be that we need to name renewal, revitalization. We're asking, can these bones live? We serve a God that brings dead things to life. That's a great question to ask. And so it might be that your next step is somewhere around, maybe we need to do this whole process and start at the beginning and see what new life God could bring. Some of us in the room might need to ask a resurrection question. This is the hardest one to admit out loud, but it's one of the most bravest declarations of faith to say that this tree, as it exists, has died, but it's going to leave a hole in the ground if we just rip it out. So what if we steward this moment to make a bold act of faith to pass on what we have to a next generation? That can look like bringing in a church planter to replant from within. That could look like partnering with the Presbytery to have somebody come into your session and coach the session really intentionally to discern, are we renewal or resurrection? It could look like that we functionally close and the church and the property and use those funds to invest in church planting in the broader Upper Midwest Presbytery. God is not displeased with pruning, with churches having life cycles. The question is, how do we steward where we're at? It's nobody's fault. We're just here. What's the best way forward? Okay? If you're in leadership transition, I don't know if many of us are, but that's a whole different ballgame. so that's just a little slide to say, pause, don't do radical things, do church transition resources before we do anything else. So let me give you a psalm, and then I'm going to give you a minute to look your church in the eye. How many of us are here by ourselves? We're not in a local church. 1, 2. If you're by yourself, come hang out with me up here. Otherwise, we're going to take a few minutes after I share with you Psalm 46 to just connect with your church. And what I want to encourage you to think about is what is one thing that you can bring back to your church in your circle of influence? So you can't come back and say, we're committed to doing the Cultivating Flourishing Church process. You're not yet. But if your pastor's here and an elder is here and some staff is here, you might say, we need to go back and have the wider conversation. We think we want to do this. Maybe for you, it's, I want to talk more about that governance because I need to have a hard conversation about my own spiritual life. What's your next flourishing step? Don't take communion until you're asking for the Lord of that table to be with you on that step. Can we do that together, friends? Psalm 46 is one of my favorites, and it makes me mad because God is a refuge and a strength. I just want him to be a refuge. Refuges protect from hardship. They help by removing the pain, sheltering you from the storm. Strength pushes me through it. Oh, I don't like that. But God somehow in his providence knows when to do which. And wherever you're at in naming a next step, whether it's resurrection or resourcing or renewal, I don't know which one you need. Do you need refuge from the inner critic in your own brain telling you, the whisperer of our enemy, that somehow you're in charge of controlling what you can't control? Do you need strength to turn around and have some hard conversations that could be the means of grace for future years to come? Or maybe we just need to name that right now it feels like the earth is giving way and mountains are falling into the sea and waters are raging in front. The life as I know it isn't going well. Church as I know it isn't going well. And the psalm says, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. Bible nerd stuff, did Jerusalem have a river? No. This is describing God as living water in the midst of a walled city. It's a way of saying that if God is in our midst, we have all we need. God's within her, she will not fail. You guys know the story. 2 Kings 19, you all read it yesterday. I know it's just memorized in your bones. 2 Kings. The invading Assyrians come to Hezekiah. Most scholars say this is what Psalm 46 is about. They come to Hezekiah and they say, we're going to surround your city. We have 185,000 troops. We'll give you 2,000 horses for free if you can mount that much of an army. The ultimate taunt. And they give it to the king. His mountains have fallen into the sea. Life as he knows it is over. It feels overwhelming and he doesn't even know what to do or where to start or how to lead. And so he takes the letter from the king and he goes to the temple and he puts it down on the floor. And he does not say, I'm a mechanic and I know how to fix this. He does not say, it's all my fault. You should just smite me off the face of the planet. I can't lead anymore. What he says is, I'm the leader, but this is your people, God. Yeah, I'm a gardener, but I'm also a tree. And this is scary. And I don't know what to do. So what do you want to do? And then the story goes that a single angel of the Lord overnight takes care of business in one of those Old Testament ways. And so then the psalm says, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, God lifts his voice, and things melt. They didn't have enough army to mount 2,000 horses, but if God was on their side, it doesn't matter who's against. Right? You know the verse from Romans. So come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations he brought to the earth is not, look how mean and angry and scary God is. It's look how powerful he is, and he's on your side. Look what he's already done miraculously, and he's not done. And Jesus said, Revelation 21, I give water to those who are thirsty. Everlasting water, rivers of living water flow from me, from the one who on the cross said, I thirst. He died so that we could live. We'll finish where we started. That the one who calls us to cultivate trees hung on a tree. The one who calls us to cultivate life gave up his life so that when he came out of the tomb, when he came to resurrection life, it was that seed that was planted in your heart and in your churches. This is overwhelming if we have to do it ourselves. But it's the discovery of an adventure if Jesus is on the move. So when we come to this table, chat for a brief moment, pray together as a church. It can't be an hour-long conversation. but as a church, I want you to chat quietly, process where are we at, how can we pray, what are we thinking, and then walk past our prayer wall, and then come take communion.
Oh, no, we got communion set up.
We got a whole communion? Oh, we have a worship thing. Great! Then don't do that yet. Just talk amongst yourselves for 5 minutes, okay? And then we'll come back and we'll do communion. Go. People who aren't connected with a church here, come up and talk with me, and we'll talk about your next steps. Just a 5-minute debrief. Let's take one more minute and then we'll come back.
And their own comprehension and their own discernment about what's going on.
That's a good question, because if you just ignore all that stuff, that's not genuine. But if you dwell too long on it, then it's always, well, you lose hope, is ultimately.
He sent me a picture.
And so what will happen is as we start moving into that, so one of the things we're talking about in session is 3-year plan that does a lot of this, but how do we then make sure that as it's being framed, it isn't through more laws, more all that sort of thing. We're not doing this anymore, we're being more efficient in this way, being more focused in that way. And then how do we change that so that it's, we're doing this because this is the right thing to do, this is what God has called us to do, and we don't make decisions based on how people react. That's what's going to be the hardest thing, and honestly, I think that would be almost the hardest thing through which we determine what is.
Let's come on back. 100%. Without a doubt. Are those gobos that you're running up there? Let's go. Bring me back to my theater days. That's fun. I have gone 10 minutes over my allotted time. I apologize. And what did you hear? This is important. What's the sense of God's invitation for you or for your church?
I think transitions can be a safe time because many people want to posture themselves to ask questions and listen.
Yes.
Yes.
There's never a bad time to ask questions and listen. Transitions make it easy.
Yes.
Right? And Melissa's such a savvy leader. She's going to play the I'm new here card and get to ask all the questions.
But that's safe then.
But it's safe. It's such a critical time to have strong leadership. And I'm so thrilled. So thrilled. You're going to be great. What else?
Our initial intents are not misaligned.
Tell me more.
We're both going in the same direction when we first look at it. We don't necessarily use the same words, but we're going in the same direction. So
Praise the Lord.
we all row the same boat.
That's right. Yeah. Love that. Okay. Anybody have knew immediately what a next step would be as you talked with your group?
I think one thing is to get more of our leaders on the same page of honestly evaluating.
Mm-hmm.
And telling the truth about the reality.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, leaders tell the truth. I like that. That's good. What else? Okay. A couple of housekeeping things. If you have follow-up questions, snide remarks, whatever, that's my contact info. It's my email and my cell phone, so that goes to me. If you want the top brass and the original speaker, her name's Caitlin at eco-press.org. So if you need to level up and speak to my manager, so to speak, you're welcome to talk to her. If this was a 2/3 of a day on a Saturday conversation that never gets brought up again, that's sad. if this is the beginning of ongoing conversations, how exciting.
Amen.
Right? So I hope, in God's grace, you ain't done. That we're just getting started on a paradigm shift and some shared language that helps us have these conversations. And as a presbytery, I'm sure your leaders will be debriefing with you and what does it look like? You know, do we do a cohort as a presbytery to do this whole thing together? Are we in such different paths that we just need to resource and encourage and everybody chooses their own next steps forward? I don't know, Judy's in charge. She'll figure all that out. But it's a privilege to get to see the Lord at work in intentional, important conversations. So let me pray for you, and then I'm going to turn it over to the communion team. Lord, I'm so grateful for what just took place over these last 10 minutes, whether it was the continuation of conversations that have been unfolding over months and years, or if it was the beginning of new conversations that we haven't yet had. Lord, I pray that the journey that each person and each church is on would have been clarified by your grace and galvanized by your Spirit and encouraged in the hope of our Savior Jesus. Lord, our hope is not in our ability as leaders. Our hope is in you, our shepherd, who laid down your life for us, your sheep. And so, God, as we come to this table of communion, would you speak words of grace and truth, nourish our souls with the bread and the cup, so that we are refreshed to go back into the places where you have asked us and invited us to lead as we follow you. Bless this presbytery. Bless these leaders. Keep them. May your face shine on them and be gracious to them. And keep us ever mindful that you are with us always, even till the end of the age. In Jesus' name, amen.
We give Tim a round of applause. I know we all really, I could just tell, I could look around as he was talking, and Tim, if people weren't giving you lots of feedback, it is kind of like drinking from a fire hose. But I could see everybody was like really thinking. You guys were not on your phone thinking, when's this going to be over? So I just appreciate so much you're pouring out so much helpful information, so well presented. So thank you, Tim. Thanks for coming. And it takes a lot of time and effort to prepare and present this. So we're very thankful. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming. And I just want to thank the people at Faith. Thank you, tech team back there, tech and sound. And we tried to thank the women who have been so hospitable and done the food, and maybe we'll see them at lunch. There should be boxed lunches to go, I think. Is that right? And thanks Kurt and Joel and just the whole team at Faith for hosting us. It's a big job, and really, really appreciate it. So we're going to have communion. I'm not going to say anything anymore. We're going to end with worship. There'll be box lunches on the way out. The only other housekeeping detail is that we will be sending you some kind of an evaluation form, and we're eager to get your feedback on the meeting and suggestions for any further meetings. So I think that's all. Anybody else? Okay.
I've got mine. Thank you. So we'll have lunches out in Faith Hall. You are more than welcome to stick around and continue in conversation, but I understand that life gets in the way and it may be time to go on to the next thing. I have eagerly looked forward to celebrating this supper and this meal with my fellow Presbyterians, my fellow eco tribe, and this local tribe that we get to do life together. And so much of that life happens behind the scenes. I just love that it's hard to get you guys into a session because you're hanging out. And that's what Jesus really did with his disciples, that you look at the Lord's Supper and you're just like, man, that must have been a pretty cool party. And what a formational moment. But what a chance it is to, as you feel called to go back and look at the wall, the wins and the losses, maybe one way to look at it, but to pray for each other, to be in this together. So often it feels like we're doing this alone, but we aren't. Not only do we have each other, but we have the spiritual sustenance that comes from this meal. So I will set the table for you. It will be ready for you to come up. I will be speaking to you as you come up, but it will be just an open table for you to come and enjoy after you have some prayer time. But as you partake of this meal, first acknowledge your sin, your insignificance, and your inability to do this call. And then as you partake, remember that it is not about your ability, but that the life that Christ gives, because as we remember, God brings the growth. So brothers and sisters, on the night that Jesus was betrayed, just before he took the bread and he broke it, and he said, "This is my body broken for you. Take and eat and do so in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup and he said, "This is the cup of the new covenant, sealed and poured out in my blood." Friends, whenever we drink this cup and partake of this bread, we do remember the Lord's death. But we also proclaim that soon, very soon, he is coming again and will make all things new. So again, take your time, walk by the back wall, but eventually come and enjoy what the Lord has done.
to Calvary when Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wound, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord, our God. And on the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trample death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord, our God. He shall return in robes of white. The blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. He shall return in robes of white. The blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Let's sing, oh, praise the name. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord, our God. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God.
know about you, but I was feeling really discouraged before that song. Feeling very overwhelmed. Because I really want to look at that back wall and think that's all the stuff I have to fix. But I know I'm not supposed to, Tim. So I guess at least that's our takeaway. It's not our job to look at that wall and think that's what we have to fix. Instead, we get to be trees. Because we are trees first. Before we are gardeners, we are trees. And we get to just sit here and worship. So let's do that with one more song together. 1,000 generations falling down in worship to sing the song of ages to the Lamb. And all who've gone before us and all who will believe will sing the song of ages to the Lamb. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all. All thrones and dominions, all powers and positions, your name stands above them all. And the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. If you've been forgiven, and if you've been forgiven, you've been redeemed, sing the song forever to the Lamb. If that's you, sing it out. And if you walk in freedom, and if you bear His name, sing the song forever to the Lamb. We'll sing the song forever and amen. Sing your name. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all. All thrones and dominions, all powers and positions, your name stands above them all. And the angels cry, holy, our creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. Hear your people sing, hear your people sing, holy, to the King of Kings, holy, you will always be, holy, holy forever, you will always be,
brothers and sisters, we do not do this crazy thing called ministry because we are somehow worthy. We do this thing because he is worthy. I sometimes wonder what it would look like if we went from this place and just started singing in the streets. You will always be holy forever. Go and continue to sing the song to the Lamb who died for your sins. Go in God's peace. Amen.